Hey everyone, welcome back to Create Magic at Work. Today is a super special day for me and hopefully for all of you because we have one of our most popular guests returning to have another conversation that hopefully resonates and inspires with everyone. And it is Dr. Erin Tabacco. I have asked Erin back to the show because it's been a while. It's been a minute since we've had you on the show.
Yeah.
Um, gosh, I should have looked up how long it's been, but a couple of years ago, you shared how to be present at a whole other level, sort of, in my opinion, blew the lid off of what our current sort of ideas were around presence, which I so appreciated. And we'll put all the links to these past episodes in the show notes, but that took off. That was one of the most popular episodes in Create Magic at Work history, along with your conversation around feedback, which you came back and talked about feedback, which in my opinion is a feedback model that you shared that is on a whole other level than the ones that are taught in the corporate space and in trainings. Incredible, eye-opening work. So thank you for sharing that. And I have asked Erin back to Create Magic at Work because he has some newer ideas and concepts that you and I have talked about for quite some time, but we haven't really recorded and shared it with the Create Magic at Work listeners or community. So thanks for coming back to dive into, I think, three I'm going to try to cover in this episode. Three really cool, eye-opening, enlightening topics. So thanks for being here, Erin.
Oh, as always, thank you for having me. Yeah, I think it was it may have been 3 years ago when we had that conversation on, presence at a very high level,
Hmm.
and our relationship has grown quite a bit over those years. I mean, we knew each other before that, but not a whole lot of time. Maybe 4 years. I don't know, 4 or 5 years. I don't remember. Doesn't
Mm.
matter. Yeah, I'm grateful to be back. I appreciate the invitation, and I'm glad that some of the things that I'm sharing out in the world are resonating with you and others. And if we can talk about that and it's useful to people, then I feel like that's a really good day.
Yeah. And I should share with everyone listening, since the start of Magic Thread Media, the podcast network that I started, Aaron has started his own podcast, which will be a topic of conversation today as well, called Circles Edges. And it is it's a late night radio show style podcast, um, designed to be listened to before we go to bed at night. Really, the show releases in the evening. And it's been such an honor to be a part of bringing that to life because the response from Circle's Edges has been incredible.
Yeah, it really has.
Incredible.
And you know, y- to make sure it's clear to everyone listening, Circle's Edges wouldn't be here without you, Amy. And you're, reaching out to say, I'm launching Magic Thread Media, giving me goosebumps. I'm like, perfect name for you and a media company.
Yeah.
And I want you to do a show and whatever you want to do, Aaron. And I was like, okay. Something inside me says, yes, I need to do this. And so I appreciate you opening that doorway. I think it's come to me at a very important time in my life and it has really become a focus of my spiritual work in the world right now. So thank you for the opportunity.
Hmm. So while we're on the topic, tell us more about Circle's Edges because, you know, you, w- your voice and your message resonates with people so deeply and they feel so connected to you when you speak and you have a way about speaking and listening to others where they really feel seen. And so being a guest on podcasts was great, but I definitely saw that you needed your own container for this energy. And I'm honored to have to have that container for Circle's Edges. Just tell us a little bit more about Circle's Edges and what people can expect to hear if they head on over to listen to the show.
Well, I mean, for me, this was born out of a need, a really deep need to one, find an energetic current of connection and comfort in the world right now. I just over the last year, I have become increasingly, um, chaotic in my energy, responding to all of the things happening in the world, and feeling sort of agitated and restless and anxious and concerned about that. I'm concerned about myself, concerned about my family, our society, the world at large. And when you reached out about a show, I knew a few things right away. I didn't want to interview people.
Hmm.
Um, I didn't want there to be any dialogue that was not between me and a listener. I wanted to create a space where people could come for really substantive, deep, connecting, and real talk with somebody that felt safe. And for me, I reflected on my own childhood and was taken back to, growing up in the 80s in particular, this late night FM radio voice phenomenon um, kind of became a modality of media in those years. And I would be awake at night, like many of us are, restless and unable to sleep. And often I would just literally turn the dial on my FM AM radio um, to find somebody out there that I felt I could connect to, and that this this model. I mean, maybe they would DJ some music or what have you here or there, but very often it was just long monologues.
Hmm.
Sometimes they would take a caller, sometimes they wouldn't. They would muse about all kinds of things going on in the world and everyday life, and they were just keeping people company.
Hmm.
And there was something really deeply comforting about that, about both the intimacy and the distance with the stranger. And I felt when considering a show, I thought that's really the energy that I feel I need in the world right now. And maybe it's time for me to show up and be that energy and not just look for it as a recipient, but generate it. And so, yeah, that's what it is, right? It is some very deep, reflective, philosophical, spiritually intelligent conversations that are thematically tied to the repeating patterns and experiences of our lives. So the circles
Hmm.
that come in many, many forms. There are external circles of society and relationships, there are internal circles, there are very large arcs like whole civilizations and societies and philosophies and things that come and go like tides. um, but every once in a while we as people, we notice these circles, these patterns, and very often that noticing is a signal that there's some edge it's exposing for us that we need to pay attention to. And that edge is usually an invitation to move into a higher self in some way, to improve how we're showing up in the world, to experience a different relationship with the world around us or ourselves. And those edges, we could choose to draw back and ignore them, or we can kind of lean into them. And my own experience has been that when I discover these patterns, especially if they're patterns that are unpleasant patterns in some way that cause distress or grief or loss or anxiety. I have learned the practice of waking up to it quickly, diving in to understand it, and then rather than running from it, like turning full head on into it, to discover the edge and the invitation and to grow, because I don't want to be living out that pattern over and over and over again, especially if it's, very unpleasant or keeping me back in some
Hmm.
way. So, I mean, that's kind of, like the 30,000-foot view of what Circles Edges is. It's deep personal connection across space and time with people, talking about things that matter and that, might help people navigate some of the edges they're seeing in themselves.
Would you say that if we, part of Circle's Edges is this pattern and maybe bringing the pattern to our attention, and then when we face that edge, is that what you're saying? Is that a moment that we break the circle? Is that a moment we break the pattern if it's something that is causing grief or is harming us?
I mean, it certainly could be. I think the position I take with the show, and listeners who've tuned in will understand that it's not an advice show. I don't know what is right for anybody listening. We haven't had any conversations or dialogue directly. Um, these are really just opportunities to maybe reflect as an individual, examine what's there. And if there's something inside that really, one of these sort of circles that really touches you or grabs your attention, the invitation then is to go on a path of discovery to figure out what that means for you, and to know that you can just keep tuning into the show and I'll be there, and you're not having to do it alone necessarily. Maybe distant. I might not ever know the story, but there's a certain comfort in knowing that you're not the only one out in the world who might be trying to move beyond something, break a cycle, grow from it, or not even necessarily. Sometimes the circles we experience, we can't extricate from our lives, but maybe we can live in relationship with them differently. So there's lots and lots of options. I never pretend to know what is the right answer for anybody, but all I do is sort of try to call attention to the things I have noticed, and then invite people to do the same.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I felt really resonated with me was the episode on fixation
Mm,
and talking about the circle. In that circle, I don't know if it was the circle or the edge, the need that we have to fix,
mhm,
the need that comes up within us to step in, um, and help others when in fact it might be detrimental to ourselves and the other person.
mhm,
And one of the two words that you used really hit me was empathic distress. And I have felt that. I have felt empathic distress in situations where I can feel what's going on
mhm,
and I want to step in and fix it, whatever it might be. And one of the realizations from your show and from fixation was really that was kind of about me and me being uncomfortable in the distress that I was feeling and working towards making that distress go away. And the damage that it can cause was a new revelation in listening to that episode of fixation and hearing about empathic distress. I hadn't heard that before, and I listened to a lot of different things.
mhm.
Um, Anyway, we also hosted an Edgewalker cafe on the shadows of empathy, sort of connecting the two here,
Hmm.
and lots of themes coming up with that. Why? Why are we doing this? And how do we walk that edge of not abandoning someone that needs help if we are compassionate and have empathy, and versus stepping in to fix everything all the time to alleviate our own distress that we're sitting with.
Yeah. Well, I think many people responded to that. I had quite a bit of feedback on that episode, in terms of you know sort of high empathy people reaching out and really talking about how these things really touched them and called them to attention as well.
Mhm.
So you certainly weren't alone in that. I think it's a little bit of a um, it's a bit of a messy circle that we find ourselves in, many of us. And there's no reason to judge ourselves for it. Let me just start with that. This isn't something that we should moralize within ourselves and feel bad about. Um, but neurobiologically, humans have been a successful species. Evolutionary biologists talk about this, because we developed this internal biological, neurological capacity for empathy, right? Like, it's helped us be successful as a species because we become stronger and care for one another better when we have this emotional response to other people and their needs. So it's a fundamentally human thing. Unfortunately, many of us grow up in situations, and this is a global phenomenon, where that um, that capacity for empathy and its expression and communication is not well stewarded by our families and the rest of the world. And a portion of us incorrectly tie our identities as showing up, through the behavior of showing up empathetically for somebody. We tie our identities to that and start to see ourselves as somebody who is responsible to respond to everybody and their needs, and look for opportunities then to kind of live that story out over and over and over again. And when we have these sort of leaky identities, identities that are permeable to the world around us, that they're not necessarily all owned internally, but there's something about our identity that is dependent outside of us. That's kind of where that there's this perfect storm. So if my identity is somebody who is a fixer and shows up in the world and takes care of everything and makes everything better, and the world responds positively to that, because why wouldn't they? People want to be helped and they want to be seen and noticed. Um, if our identity isn't entirely autonomous within us, we run the risk then of unknowingly needing that relationship with other people, to feel that we are who we are. Like, to actually, it's like the mirror. Well, it's like looking in a mirror behaviorally. I show up to fix something, somebody responds to that, and then I see myself as that person, and it's this like self affirming
Mhm.
cycle or circle. The problem is that, as altruistic and as loving and as compassionate as showing up for people can be, um, we can at times be utilizing that energy of whatever they're going through to benefit our own identity affirmation.
Mhm.
And it becomes about us even though it should never be about us. And that's kind of what I mean about like this idea of like leaky identity or permeable identity. And I mean, on one extreme, that you can see that manifested in people who experience codependency in relationships,
Mhm.
where two folks who have kind of some focused dysfunctions um, ally themselves to actually experience that circle intentionally over and over and over and over again, which psychologically, manifestations of that are usually pretty pathological and pretty damaging to people. That's a very different function than interdependence, where there's two autonomous identities choosing to work together cooperatively. It's a
Mhm.
very different situation. So, and then in the episode, we kind of talked about, well, I mean, I talked about, there was no we because there's no guest. But I kind of talked about the many ways that that can unintentionally get in the way of progress for ourselves and for others. So for example, if someone shows up and they're very, very distressed about something, and they start to tell the story and break down into tears, if we're one of those folks who's really struggling with the fixing and the leaky identity piece, and we jump right in right away, with oh shh, it's okay, I've got you, everything's going to be okay. I'm here. I'm going to take care of you. We'll get through this. This immediately responding to a situation to affirm our identities, do our jobs, do the things that make us feel like we're whole. And notice I said make us feel like we're whole. We shut down like the expression of someone's grief. We literally say stop, like don't express this, and
Mm.
that gets in the way of showing up for someone as a witness. It also gets in the way of them expressing needs, thoughts. How many of us actually need to talk things out aloud to even understand what it is we're thinking? And when we jump in right away because we're in a state of this empathic distress, we clip all of that opportunity off for expression, for thinking, for reflection. And we center our own need, as you said, Amy. Like you noticed that at times in these experiences, that it's your own discomfort calling you for some sort of form of self-soothing. And actually, it's interesting because it's self-soothing, but it's in the context of another person.
Yeah.
And that's what we don't want to show up for people in the world that way. I don't think we want to. And I think most of us don't realize, if we're in that cycle, that we're even doing that. But this is very much a pattern, and I can speak to it pretty, from a pretty educated perspective, because I spent years, as a nursing professor teaching, frontline nursing caregivers, professional nurses, how to do that, how to show up and be present for other people. Now I do it in the world of executive coaching. And when people are struggling to feel like they're adding value or helping somebody find comfort or helping somebody, achieve some sort of epiphany or great insight, if that feels like it's lacking in the exchange, then that individual experiences a lot of times distress. I've literally had people crying, saying, but all I want to do is be helpful. And in that session, I didn't do anything that was helpful. And I feel like I failed them. And there's this like debrief after a session. And it's very interesting. It's just an interesting phenomenon to sit with. And it's like, well, that might be, that's all your interpretation and your experience of what happened. And
Yeah.
also, that's not the focus. Like this, you're literally, if you kind of were to watch yourself on a camera, you would be like, wow, I didn't even talk about the person and their needs or anything. I'm debriefing all about my lived experience in that moment.
Mm.
It's like, oh yeah, see, these are the things that that when that sort of circle emerges, and if sometimes people just get tired of that. There's a lot of people who um, kind of self-identify as empaths
Mhm.
in a very science fiction-y sort of way, as
Mhm.
if that is kind of a real thing. And it is a very real thing that we have the biology to have our emotional centers activated by someone else's lived experience. That is the nature of this mechanism. Um, it's also not true that we are experiencing the other person's emotions, thought, spirit, etc. I mean, that is what's happening in their body, in their spirit, in their emotional state, in their world. And we begin telling ourselves a story that we understand, we know, we relate to it. But really, it's our body responding to this observation and filling in lots and lots of gaps. So until we realize that and start to take a walk down the edge of that empathy to understand what when it's serving us and when it's serving others, it's only after like taking that journey that we can I think kind of rise above all of that and accept that we have these emotional responses and bring them forward in authenticity and yet not make it all about us.
Yeah, I just my take on everything that you're saying. This rise of spirituality that I've seen in pop culture, um, there's been a lot of language around the empath that has,
Mm-hmm.
that more people are exposed to and speaking about. And I started seeing it when these things sort of became more popular in pop culture. This pop
Mm-hmm.
culture spirituality is, I guess, what I call it.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something of a shadow of this in it where people were made to feel special,
Mm-hmm.
that they had some sort of special gift or specialness or special quality like being an empath. Um and then I saw a lot of individuals that started identifying as being an empath,
Mm-hmm.
using it and using that identity, or using maybe a spiritual counselor or advisor or an astrologer or whoever told them, "Oh my gosh, you're such an empath. Oh yeah, you can take on the energy of the room and you can feel all the feelings." And so there was an element of specialness in that. And then there was also an element of, I'm special. I can't be in this room anymore because I take on everybody's energy, or I have to shield myself from you energetically because I'm an empath. And the empath mantra that I've learned and I've shared with others is observe, don't absorb. There was a teaching in the spiritual intelligence teachings from the SQ21 that shared, as coaches, as therapists, as a person that wants to be of service or help someone else, that there is a big difference between empathy and compassion. And in their teachings, empathy is when you are taking on others' stuff as your own. And as you said, there's leakage there. Like, it's almost like you
Mm-hmm.
can't differentiate between what's yours and what's not yours. And so essentially you're taking on the suffering of someone else and trying to fix it yourself, but it's not your suffering. It's not yours to fix. And so in the SQ teachings, they recommend leading from more of this is their language and their definitions, but like from a compassionate state where I am sort of what you said, I am autonomous,
Hmm.
but I can see the suffering of others and I can help alleviate that suffering without taking it on myself.
Right.
And I think there's something interesting about the evolution of what's going on with spirituality that I'm watching. Um there was something of a shadow there where people were made to feel special,
Hmm.
and now that things are shifting and evolving, I think there's a realization that I don't know, maybe the SQ teachings are really onto something, that leading from compassion might be the way to lead with all of this. Because as you talked about, then there's this other part of empathy where it's a huge shadow, where I'm not even focused on the person. You just gave an example. I'm focused on how that went for me and what did that look like for me. But then there's another edge to that where the women in particular, I think there's a whole other teaching that women have to, or lesson, or energy that we have to kind of perk up and pay attention to, because there's a lot of system um socialization
Hmm.
in women to be the fixers, to be the healers, to be the nurturers, to maybe not have strong boundaries because of all of that wrapped up into one. There's other layers there, and also the recognition of the high self-orientation when I am in empathic distress at times. So those are sort of the themes that are coming to me as you share. And then I feel frustrated inside too, because I'm like, well, I'm a human. And if somebody is hurting, and if I want to help them, now what do I do with this? How do I differentiate all of these things you and I just talked about instead of just living my life and wanting to be a good person and helping?
Hmm.
So I'm
Yeah.
sure a
Yes.
lot of people listening are sort of feeling these same things. So that's why I bring it
Right.
up.
Yeah. Well, as I kind of said in the episode, what I don't want to message is that that every desire to be a compassionate responder in the world is coming from a sense of selfishness. I don't believe that it is by any means, but it is a complicated relationship we have when we are experiencing um, emotional empathy. Emotions are rising within us physically, relating to another person's experience. And then the expression of compassion toward them, which I think is like the active outcome that can stem from that empathic or empathetic response.
Hmm.
And I think maybe that's the nuance: is there's empathetic and there's empathic. And I think that but between the world of science fiction and pop culture spirituality, the concept of being an empath has been kind of written into a certain script about what it is, and some things being factual, like the fact that we can experience empathy, that there's a part of our brains that is activated by someone else's emotions, and similar emotions in ourselves can rise forward, sometimes different emotions, but it's just this uh, uh, emotional conversation we're having. It can happen without words, even looks, glances, tearful eyes. I mean, you don't necessarily need words to communicate
Hmm.
through this concept of empathy, or this function of empathy. But to the points you're making about how society and society, meaning all, I'm using it to mean all of the social influences in our lives, our families of origin, the friends we choose and grow up with, the adults we associate with, our intimate partners, the communities we align ourselves with, the faith groups or the vocational communities, the pursuits, all of that, is that we end up in trouble, like I said earlier, when we've somehow attached our identity and our sense of who we are to the experience of this empathy and compassion in its expression. Um, that's where I think, like pop culture, um, maybe the those in the spiritual industry.
That's a good one. The
The
industry. Yeah.
spiritual industrial
Yeah.
complex.
There you
That's out
go.
there, selling all kinds of things to
Hmm.
people. One of the things that's true about people, generally speaking, this is from the body of work in psychology. People who tend to be very, very high in measures of empathy, very often come from traumatic backgrounds in some way. Something about their development life experiences has taken that early human developmental ability to experience emotion in ourselves by witnessing it in others, and has really turned that switch on and the volume all the way up. And so
Hmm.
unknowingly, it's not like people said, "Oh, I'm going to become dysfunctionally uh, empathetic in the world." That's
Hmm.
nobody says that, but that's kind of what happens, is that volume gets so turned up, and then people become hypersensitive to that experience. Um, if you're looking at a population of people who have had that experience, and then someone comes along selling a workshop that's going to tell you how to deal with the world as an empath because you're special. I mean, gosh, if I've spent a lifetime experiencing tragedy and someone shows up and says, "You're so special because of this," there's a certain vulnerability and a willingness to want to go down a path to say, "Oh, right, maybe this isn't necessarily, you know, uh, well, maybe what I should say is maybe this is something that sets me apart, something that stabilizes my identity."
Hmm.
That's, I think, what I'm getting to is that this
Hmm.
is a stabilizing factor, and it's an affirming factor of that leaky identity problem we're having, linking our doing, the act of doing, which is fixing, to our being, and our identity. So there's just a lot of, I think it's kind of a perfect storm of situations, whether it's social scripting about women and nurturing, for example, or children who have had adverse childhood events that really follow them for many years, and kind of set them up to be the responsible, caregiving, nurturing types to keep everything moving in the world, which was adaptive. Like they had to do that to survive. I come from that background, so I'm not pointing any fingers. I can
Hmm.
specifically say that this has been a part of my journey. Um, it can be very, very, very uh, overwhelming to have to sort all of that out. And so when people show up with answers, it feels good. And if one of the answers is, you're this unique human that very few people have this, ability, and there's something special about you, and here's how you're going to have to navigate that. Um, well, there is something special about you. I mean, the ability to have a really highly tuned sense of, emotion, or hopefully emotional vocabulary to go with it, not just the feelings, but, some emotional intelligence around what all those feelings are. That is special and it's wonderful. It isn't you. That's not your identity.
Hmm.
It is something that occurs within you. And then the calling is to figure out how do you navigate the world in a way that actually is productive and generative and compassionate for self and others, and not be somebody who maybe is uh, distracted from doing the hard work to plug those leaky identity boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the gifts, if I may, of an empath are available to everyone because we're human. And so maybe that ability to be attuned to the emotions in your environment came from the different places that you mentioned they might come from.
Mm-hmm.
We all have that ability within us. And then whether we have to plug the leaks and figure out how to use it in a healthy way, or don't have that ability at all, or maybe we need to skill build in that ability a little bit more, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm looking at it as a way of we can all tap into this and then figure out a way to use it for good, for the greater
Yeah.
good of all.
Absolutely. And that's, I think, the whole purpose, and what we're getting to, I think, really naturally is um, why the program is called Circles Edges, right? It's like because we're in this pattern of showing up in the world in a very specific way. And I mean, the reality is, if for anyone who is listening today and thinking about this from the perspective of, gosh, I identify as an empath. Um, what does this mean for me? Is this bringing up something that feels threatening to you? Is it something that feels affirming to you? Is it something that's enlightening to you? I don't know what your experience of it is, but I guess what I would offer is, if you feel that much of your life experience is in the empath or empathic realm, um, what have you noticed about relationships with the world around you?
Hmm.
Because if you look back and much of your experience brings sadness, loss, confrontation, confusion, difficulty, distance, drama,
Mm,
that may be calling you to look at the edge within that circle to see if there is a different way that you can still honor the fact that you have an expanded volume all the way up ability to witness and respond to emotions in the world around you, and separate your identity from that so that you can learn to be with others in the world in a way that feels healthier and more generative and more compassionate and less exhausting.
mm,
Because what I hear from people who say, oh, I'm an empath, and it's just exhausting, it's usually the second phrase is something about exhaustion. I just get so exhausted by certain people, and I get so exhausted being in relationships, and I get so exhausted by all of these other pieces. Um, that's an edge calling your attention, because there isn't actually a necessity for you to be exhausted by all of that.
mm,
It is something that can be lived with as the beautiful gift it is, without it depleting you of your life force and your autonomy to go forward in the world and your opportunity to be in relationship with others.
hmm. Thank you for that insight.
You're
Yes.
welcome.
Yes. Um, we have so much to talk about. I want to get to one more
Yeah,
piece if you're open to it.
absolutely.
Your work on quantum presence.
Mm-hmm.
We well, first, for everyone listening, if they haven't heard, I'm like, sum it up in a minute. Your work on quantum presence.
Oh,
If you could
absolutely.
share a little bit, I know because I have a few questions around it, but for
Yeah.
everyone listening, quantum presence? Like, what do you mean when you're saying that?
Well, I think I want to start with the disclaimer that in the last several years, we've entered, um, the tech world has entered into a phase of using the word quantum
Yeah.
to market a lot of things.
Mhm.
And so what I don't want people to take away from the conversation is that this is sort of a trendy way of trying to to come up with some brandable form of spirituality, like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, a lot of the
Um,
coaching industry, like, "Have your quantum leap. Give me
yes,
$60,000 for your
yeah,
quantum leap."
exactly.
Yeah.
I'm actually using the term quantum here, from its sort of scientific roots in the quantum physics realm. And I'm thinking about that as our quantum physicists are exploring the universe and trying to figure out, what time even is,
Mhm.
because we're not actually sure what that is or if it's
Mm.
even real. But what I am talking about is, if we just start with the concept of presence, lots and lots of focus on that in many cultures over, many eons of human history. Right now, I think it's emerged in, I can't speak globally, but it's become a very popular thing in Western culture to focus on, um, especially in the leadership realm, to be present with other people, to be very present in the moment.
Mhm.
So there are all kinds of practices around how to cultivate a higher level of presence for self, being fully in a given moment, using mind body practices to be centered. And essentially, what people are talking about is, to have their own emotional and cognitive authority to say, I'm going to focus my attention solely on what is here now. I'm not going to allow my brain or my body to hijack me and make everything noisy and shift my focus away from something that isn't even present with me in this proximity. So I think there's sort of a basic understanding of that's what we're talking about when we're talking about presence. And there's also kind of an idea that if we can really get good at practicing present, that being able to fully inhabit this space we call now, that there's this very high level of almost existential bliss that can be found, and that's probably true. It also feels almost unattainable. I mean, the perfectly silent mind, is that really even a human quality? Because as soon as we start to acquire language in childhood, we develop an internal voice that it never shuts up. And to try and make that quiet is quite a task. And there are religious orders across many denominations and philosophies where there's this pursuit of that, and it takes lifetimes of practice. And some people, it seems, I mean, there's some. I've seen the brain scans in of Buddhist monks. I mean, there are studies literally around this phenomenon. What does the brain look like if it's perfectly silent? And apparently, some people actually get there after 40, 50 years of learning to meditate.
Mhm.
Um, but what I'm offering with the quantum piece is sort of allied, actually, with the same spectrum experience we were talking about around empathy,
Mhm.
that for some of us, our experience of time, well, all of us, our experience of time is like all of the rest of our senses. Whether it's, empathy, the ability to perceive that someone else is having an emotional experience and to allow that to trigger our own emotional centers. There's a spectrum. Some people on the far end of that, the psychopathology of not experiencing empathy, that is a thing, right? We know that these are folks who end up becoming like serial killers, right? Extreme narcissists who literally feel no capacity for empathy. Thankfully, it's very rare in
Mhm.
the world, but that is one end of the spectrum. And then we have other folks who are like we were talking about for the last 40 minutes. It's like the volume has been turned so up
Mm.
by the circumstances of their lives, that they're highly sensitive people to the emotional states of others. That's a very real thing. They are their emotions. They're not experiencing the other person's emotions. It's theirs, but their response to it is turned all the way up. And I feel that that's very true with the concept of our sensory experience of time as well. So to be fully present in this now is one level, but I do believe as humans that we have the ability to feel past, present, and future more spherically and less linearly. And so that's what I mean by quantum presence. It's not the 1 minute overview, that's like the 5 minute overview, but it's the idea that if we can get quiet enough to actually inhabit the present moment and then open ourselves back up to the much wider experience of what's, space time in the universe, then we can very likely access um, wisdom, insight, truth, emotion, presence that is that feels very nonlinear.
Hmm.
So one example of this when it happens unintentionally is the experience of PTSD, a very, very specific, highly traumatic event that an individual moves past in, physical time, or if that's the right phrase for it, such that this event could have happened 20 years ago, but certain like environmental signals
Hmm.
put somebody immediately back into the space of their body that is recurring. And I don't think it's just a memory. I think it's like this quantum anchoring,
Hmm.
such that, if everything everywhere all at once is a very real thing in the world of physics, and it seems to me the science is continuing to point people that direction, that there actually is sort of some sort of a anchor or tie that's bringing that moment that we think is in the past we're fully living it yet again in another moment. And I think that's also true with people who have this sort of uncanny, almost precognitive sense of
Mm.
things that are coming in the universe. And
Interesting.
I think that, very sort of hardcore empiricist scientists would dismiss a lot of that as some sort of metaphysical mumbo jumbo. Like, you can't see the future. You're not experiencing the past. There's not a past life. There's not you didn't foretell the future, blah, blah, blah. But I think that discounts the fact that we don't even know what time is. And yet our biology has evolved in the context of space, time, and gravity. And all of our sensory systems have evolved because of the inputs coming at us: light, heat, sensation, pain, um, all of those things has created a biological response to those phenomenon. So why would time be any different?
Hmm.
So just like we have people who um, are, from a sight perspective, may be born without sight. There's not an actual capacity to experience the visual world. Then as we move across the spectrum, we have people who are sighted but experience color differential, information. So that's what used to be called like color blindness, right? Very commonly still called color blindness. My three sons all experience this. They see the color spectrum differently because their eyeballs have some different cells going on, some cellular deficits, so that they're not actually taking in the full spectrum of color that most humans can access. And then we have people like my former wife, who she's on the other side of the spectrum. She has this rare occurrence of what's called a fourth cone in the cellular tissue of her eye. She sees more color than what the average person could ever perceive, which I can't even wrap my brain around that, because how could I don't have that experience. So I think time and presence, this is the same thing. I think that I truly believe, and I've experienced this, um, being able to fully inhabit a past moment as though it's occurring again, full access to everything that's happening. And I have absolutely seen, into future emotional truths and wisdom, and later seen those things play out as those visions occurred.
Hmm.
So, I don't know. I don't know that that makes me special. I think it's just that I am seeing that there's a recognition of this being a spectrum experience. So, all that is to say that if we can start with trying to become really competent at being fully present in the now, there's no reason we can't start to expand our awareness from a quantum perspective toward reflection on the past, healing our own past, seeking wisdom for the future, and also recognizing that our presence is more than just about us, but that our behaviors, our actions really do ripple out into the rest of the universe around us, calling us to attention around the responsibility of that in the world and universe,
Hmm.
to be putting out the energy into the universe that actually is generative and healing and inspiring, because it does move out from us into the rest of the universe in this interconnected way.
Hmm. Great reminder. You talk about quantum markers, how, and you were referencing it, how you could go to a moment you experienced and fully relive it.
Mm-hmm.
And you referenced um, how you were able to do it with a beautiful, I guess I'll call a beautiful feel good moment where you can have a
Mm-hmm.
quantum marker and you can revisit that, or you can be there again. And then you also talked about PTSD, which I imagine is the expression of that coming up for someone when they didn't really want it to come up.
Right.
Is there a recommend or a way that we can, I mean, I'm this is a stretch, but is there a way we can eliminate quantum markers that we don't want?
Oh, yeah. Well, so just a nuance. I call them quantum
I'm
anchors.
sorry, quantum
That's,
anchors, thank you.
yeah, no. But I can see where marker is a close analog to that. Um, I mean, this is Aaron's theory of quantum presence. So I'm just going to throw it out there.
Mhm.
I could be entirely wrong. I have no idea. I mean, when physicists finally can say definitively, hey, we've now figured out what time is, then I'll start to talk about what I know and what I don't know, with more, maybe humility and clarity. But what I have come to understand in my study of the neurobiology of our perception of time and my experiences with presence is that there is a certain energy of activation to create some kind of a quantum anchor for us, whether it is unintentional or intentional. And that energy of activation is emotion. That what emotion does when it is circulating through our brains at a very sort of high biochemical voltage is it really activates the neural network of our brains, which is a vast universe of billions of cells and connections. Like, it's mind blowing, the capacity of our brain. So if the brain were a time machine, if we were to use like a science fiction analog, then what turns that on is emotion. It isn't cognition. It isn't deep thinking. It isn't meditation. It is deep, profound energy of emotion.
Mhm.
Um, and with that little bit of knowledge, it makes a lot of sense why, if we are, for example, in the PTSD scenario, if your life is threatened, if you are in an absolutely in the throes of a deeply emotional experience in the fear of life or death or harm. Imagine how much emotional energy is running through your brain and body. There's a lot there. And I have come to believe that that leaves a quantum signature or an anchor, like boom, that
Mm-hmm.
is, it has created this portal. And even if, you know, our linear experience of time takes us beyond that moment, um, inputs in our sensory world might remind us of some aspect of that. It might be conscious, it might be subconscious. We don't even know sometimes. This is the difficulty with PTSD is sometimes people think about research on soldiers post-deployment and PTSD episodes and, how a loud sound, which is not even the same sound maybe as an artillery shell that created this moment in their past, but it is loud enough that the body responds to it. Emotion goes coursing through the brain again, fight or flight, and it's like um, these two these two points in space time are fully connected. This moment of entanglement,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the quantum physicists call that entanglement.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think is happening in the human brain. This is, again, according to me, and I don't know, there's probably someone else out there too, who's more knowledgeable than this on this than I am. I am not a quantum physicist. I mean, I have a PhD, but it is not in quantum physics. Just
Mm-hmm.
anybody listening knows that for sure. Um, but that makes perfect sense to me, because if you know, two particles on the quantum level can be bound across space and time and synchronous with each other, well, then isn't that exactly what is happening in PTSD? Right? This moment of perfect connectivity in it's like simultaneously happening in two places in space time at once. And wow, that's pretty profound. Um, that could mean then we could harvest that with the right emotional state for a benefit. You know, you were talking about an example I've shared before, and probably I don't think it was on this show, maybe it was in the cafe or something, but
Mm-hmm.
um, intentionally making a quantum anchor before I even had the language for that with my first child, my son, my oldest son, and being utterly exhausted by the early days of parenting when there's no sleep. They just he struggled so much to fall asleep. He was cry for hours and hours and hours, and it was just heartbreaking and challenging and difficult. Um, and so many, many, many nights would be like on the floor on a mattress with him on my chest. And I wanted to be a father more than anything else growing up. It was the thing that I think I most aspired to. And when I finally had that experience, and there was one night in particular where it was a really rough night, and he finally had fallen asleep on my chest. And as hard as it all was, and as emotionally charged as I was by the exhaustion, I was just weeping, because even then, I knew that this beautiful feeling of this baby on my chest, like I was already losing it. Like he was going to be on a growth path, and
Mm-hmm.
there would come a day where there was a last day he laid on my chest, and I wouldn't even know that it had happened, right? Because of the routines of life.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't tell you the last day. I don't know how old he was. I don't remember when it was that he fell asleep on my chest, but it happened, right? And so I knew, I was keenly aware that this moment was going to slip by, and I couldn't exist in it forever. And I was so distraught by that realization. I became so emotional that I decided that I was going to just so fully inhabit that moment that I was going to force my brain to remember the smell of him, the weight of him, the feel of his little onesie under my fingers, the feeling of his warmth against my body, the feeling of my arms and hands around him. I was not going to allow myself to forget that if possible. And, to this day, if I want to, oh, I'm going to cry. If I want to have that experience, I just need to reach out and allow that entanglement. In its moments now, the energy of activation is, God, I miss that.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I had that again. I want to have that again. And my whole body is transported to that space. So, I think hopefully that answers your question, that, it's this emotional energy of activation that, that can lead us astray unintentionally with like a traumatic experience, or that can allow us the opportunity to take something that's really valuable to us and hold on to it in a way that is indelible.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just about the past, right? Because obviously, 24-year-old me holding my son, and now, I'm 53, almost 54. So it's almost 30 years later. Actually, this year it will be 30 years later.
Mm.
Um, 30 years ago, I had no idea that I would be connecting to my future self. I thought about it in that moment of, I want to hold on to this past. But, if I really think about it on another meta level, it's like that is me now reaching out to Aaron then, saying, keep this. I want it again. Give it back to me. I'm going to join you. I'm going to be there.
Mm.
And it's really profound.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. We've maybe gone too far today in all of this, but
No, very profound. I think that what I love about what you're sharing is the reminder that we have the power to create a quantum anchor. Sometimes we don't. Maybe, with some situations that have occurred where that were traumatic. And it sounds similar. I'm comparing it to the nervous system regulation work that's quite popularly talked about right now, and trauma triggers, PTSD, all of those things from moments we've experienced. But I think this is a great reminder for all of us. What I've heard in the nervous system regulation work called Glimmers. And so when we are experiencing what we would characterize as a glimmer in our life, maybe we have a more conscious awareness of that, and we can create more quantum anchors of the glimmers that arise as well. I don't know if we have an answer to get rid of the trauma or those triggers that might come up, or reliving those. Um, but I know that I've interacted with some people that have gone through different types of things that have maybe healed, holding on to that quantum anchor that they might not want to relive,
yeah.
hypnosis, different types of things like that. So I think
Mhm.
this is a really great, like, my takeaway is that reminder, is that if I'm in a moment that is a glimmer, I want to anchor it, and I want to
Mhm.
carry more glimmers with me.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
Well, and I think it's important, I mean, some of the emerging science around, like, for example, traumatic history and um, uh, uh, psychedelic therapies, which is and we knew this
mhm,
was a very promising area, decades ago. I'm so glad research is looking at this again more seriously.
mhm,
And more with more acceptance, because there's what it seems happens with some of these particular substances is that it creates a fluid quantum state in the brain, and a quantum flexibility that allows us to pull up the anchors, if
mm,
that makes sense.
yeah, I love that.
And so I mean, that's a physical mechanism to try and achieve that. But I guess on a spiritual side, I would say, we may have an unintentional and unhappy sort of quantum anchor in our backgrounds. Um, but what's really lovely about the fact that we have we have autonomy in our lives is that if you want to develop a practice of presence and take it in a quantum direction, there is nothing to say that a more, a safer, happier, content, and secure you can't revisit that time and offer you the security and the peace and the safety that you needed then.
Mm.
Right. I think there's a lot to be said for our future selves bringing the comfort we needed in a point in time that is a little mind blowing
Yeah.
in terms of our ability to pull up some of those anchors.
Yeah. I think you just spoke to alleviating the fear on both both of those sides. Alleviating the fear that I could be triggered at any moment. I don't feel in control of this. If I have a trauma or a PTSD, well, now if this comes up, I can comfort myself from my future self. And
Mm-hmm.
then also alleviating that that anxiety of like, oh my gosh, this moment's so amazing and it's going to go away. And then we're not even experiencing the joy in it because we're like, oh, this is good. Like, this is so good and it's going to be gone. Well, we can quantum anchor it in that way and visit it at any moment and really be present during that time. So it's almost like a healing salve
Right.
for the
Well, it's
fear and anxiety that come up in both those
Mhm.
situations.
Well, it really is, and that fear and anxiety is tied to our limitation of how we perceive time.
Mm,
Just like, just like I talked earlier about our sensory system of vision, light and color, right?
mhm,
Well, we know because of science that there's a lot more light available that we don't even see. Well, we call what we can see the visual spectrum.
mhm,
This is just stuff that we can actually see as humans. But we know, like, if we have the right kind of glasses on, we can see infrared
mhm.
or, or cameras or whatever. Like, we know that there's more information out there than our biology has been crafted to take in. And it's probably a good thing because it might be just too much information and too overwhelming. And how could you navigate it if you were seeing not just light and color, but you were seeing, auras and, infrared and like all of these other forms of visual or non visual stimuli that could, if we could perceive all of that, if we could perceive echolocation through our eyeballs, I mean, how would you navigate? You'd probably just be in this constant state of sensory overwhelm. So there's a certain functionality to the limitations of our system. But if you think about time and our linear experience of it as a functional limit to actually allow us to navigate the universe, it makes a lot more sense because if those in the camp of quantum physics who believe that time isn't actually real and everything that ever could happen or would happen or has happened all exists simultaneously at one time in the universe. I mean, if we could perceive that, I don't know how you would navigate through the biology of life,
Mhm.
right? It doesn't make it would be almost impossible. So there's a certain functionality from the limitation of experiencing time as this linear thing.
Yeah.
But that functionality of that linearity is what makes us feel anxious about past or future, holding on to it or letting it go. And, just the idea that, well, if time isn't really linear, if I can develop a practice of my presence in the quantum area, then, I've said this, I think I said it earlier, maybe on a different episode, I don't know, but the goal isn't to stop believing time is real. The goal is to move beyond being present in a linear form to being present in a spherical form.
Mm-hmm.
right? To just be able to touch, even just touch a little bit, the idea that all of our past selves and all of our future selves are accessible to us on this point we think of as a timeline can bring us so much comfort.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you really think about it, some future you has gotten to the other side of whatever difficulty someone might be facing right now. Doesn't mean that it all worked out. We have no idea how it worked out. That's what's giving us the anxiety. But some future you knows how that story worked out. And wouldn't it be great to, even if you couldn't converse with that person, to hear how the story worked out verbally? But if you could just get a sense of the emotional truth, the comfort of just knowing that you're on the other side of it, no matter how it turned out, but that we get through it, that's so powerful.
So powerful.
Yeah.
And part of what you're speaking to is the awareness of the limits of our human perception.
Mm-hmm.
And when we become aware of that, actually the world opens up for us more, because we're aware that like our view isn't the only view and that there's all of these possibilities that we, like you were talking about vision, that we might not be able to tap into with our sight or with our vision. Um, so much, so much, so much more we could talk about. We'll have to do another to be continued. Um,
I know.
okay. Let me one final question for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe we can pull an Edgewalker card for
Oh, that's a good
everybody.
idea. Yeah.
Um, tell everybody first, thank you again for coming on Create Magic at Work and sharing all of this. I mean, we dove through so much in this conversation, the shadows of empathy, the fixation that we have, um, and then finally quantum presence. What can people look forward to with Circle's Edges if they want to hop over and listen to the episodes that have released, um, and then wait for the other ones to launch? What can people look forward to if they do that?
I think what people can look forward to, I've been very intentional about how I have crafted what we can call this first season, because this concept of circles, edges, takes a little bit of getting your brain wrapped around it. And so I'm offering basically a survey of all of the different ways that these circles appear in our lives and all of the different kinds of edges that they might expose in us. And obviously, there's probably an infinite number of circles we could explore. So this is a sort of a curated, intentional take. We began the first 3 episodes looking at circles that are interior to our life, certain scripts and beliefs and understandings that recur over and over and over again, calling us to, think about who we are as individuals in the world. Then now we're in the middle of exploring circles in our relational lives. Last week, well, actually, I guess it was this week, we released an episode about our family circles, our origin stories. And we're going to then look at friendships, and we're going to look at teachers and mentors in a couple of episodes,
Mm,
in the next couple of episodes. And then I'm just going to continue moving outward in the social ecology to give everybody a sense of all the different levels of these circles. And so we'll move to the circles of space that we inhabit. After relationships, we're going to talk about places that we return to. So concepts of our lived environments and the circles we experience there. And then at the farthest episodes of the season, we're looking at the circles that are most distant, that have an impact on us, but that we have very little ability to affect change about. And these are things like circles of history, circles of philosophical trends, these big pieces of society and humanity that play out and sometimes
Hmm.
history and literature and just these pieces that are out there that so that we can kind of survey the whole universe of those. And then when we move into other seasons, I won't have it be so structured. We'll just kind of go where the topics seem to take us, but people will then at least be familiar with, is this an interior circle? Is it a social circle? Is it is it one of those long arcs and wide orbits? What is it? So
Amazing.
that's what people can look forward to.
Yeah, and thank you. I should note, we also Circles Edges is also on YouTube, and you can play it before you go to bed, and it goes to a dark screen for anybody that's interested in that. And Aaron, Aaron highly values your feedback too on the episodes. It's been amazing. The letters you receive, the people that are reaching out, the profound spiritual experiences that people are having in their lives after listening to an episode, the stories I hear. So I invite anyone, if you're intrigued, to go take a listen and share with us your experiences, because we're all part of this community together, and we're all in this together. So on that note, I'm going to pull an Edgewalker card for us
That sounds good.
from the Edgewalker card deck, since we are fellow Edgewalker facilitators. Ooh, one just fell out and flipped, so I'm assuming that we'll have to go with that one. And there's another one sticking out. We're getting two.
Hey, well, there
Okay.
you go.
Oh, one of them's a circle. I can't.
Get out.
Yay. Yay.
You're
One of them's
kidding.
a
Oh my
circle.
God.
So it's a
Oh,
circle
that's
of
amazing.
people. We'll flash this on the screen on YouTube.
Oh my
And
gosh.
the sun is shining above them. And the affirmation, or the authored by Dr. Judy Neal, is, I am aware of the power of generative conversations and look for opportunities to join with others to manifest something new. So
Mm.
good. So good.
That right there is the definition of circle's edges.
I was just saying, go to Circle's Edges, like after, if you want a generative conversation. So I am aware of the power of generative conversations and look for opportunities to join with others to manifest something new. And it's on the manifesting card in the Edgewalker card deck, which the definition there is the ability to take a thought, idea, or vision and take concrete, practical steps to bring it into being. And
That's,
we'll flash it
yeah,
on the screen,
circle and
but
moving into the edge.
look at that. The circle. Okay, Aaron, any final thoughts before we close this one
No,
out?
just that I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to you, Amy. I'm so grateful for our relationship and our association, and for all that you have done and continue to do in the world. I think, create magic at work as a concept, as a movement, as a philosophy is exactly what our workplaces need to help people heal some pretty profound wounds from our vocational life. So I thank you for all of that. And I think everybody listening, if anybody's interested in Circle's Edges, this is entirely for me service in the world. This is my resistance against just what feels like immeasurable dark forces right now. And I would love for you to join that movement and community. It is not about branding or platform building or some sort of business offering for me. It is truly about trying to unite us in strength and comfort. So I would love to have you there.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for bringing it to life. Thank you for bringing your voice to the show again. And there's something about the things that you share that help all of us operate from our higher selves a little bit more, and invite us into some deeper and more profound thinking of who we want to be and how we want to operate in the world. So thank you for sending some magic to everyone today.
Thank
With that.
you. You're all the magic.
If this conversation resonated with you, or if someone came to mind while you were listening, share the episode with them. Help others who are looking for these types of conversations find us. And don't forget to follow, subscribe, rate, and review. Until next time, keep edgewalking, keep challenging the way things have always been done, and keep making magic at work.